Easter, a holiday of joy, family gatherings, pastel colors, and children laughing as they run through green fields searching for eggs. But what if I told you that behind the bright decorations and cheerful hymns, something darker lurks, something sinister that preys on innocence? Imagine being a child in church, stepping out for just a moment, only to be lured by a figure dressed as the Easter Bunny. Not the cute, smiling one from the cartoons, but a sagging, stained costume hiding a stranger with eyes that never blink. Or picture yourself playing a harmless game of manhunt with friends in the woods, only to realize you're not the hunter, you're the prey. And deep in the countryside, beneath the shadows of the trees, families celebrating Easter unknowingly watched by figures holding torches, standing silently among upside-down crosses. These are not fairy tales. These are real stories, real encounters. And tonight, you're going to hear them all. Welcome to The Price Paid. Subscribe now, because what you're about to discover will forever change how you see Easter Sunday. Are you ready to face the darkness behind the holiday of light? Easter Sunday was supposed to be one of the happiest days of the year. The kind of day that children remember fondly for the rest of their lives. Bright colors, songs about resurrection, decorated classrooms filled with paper lambs and streamers, teachers smiling as they guided children through stories of faith. For one boy, however, that holy day became a memory so disturbing that he still cannot go through an Easter without thinking about it. He was just 6 or 7 years old, too young to fully understand the weight of danger, but old enough to remember every single detail that followed.
Tell me what you drew.
The morning began the same as it always had in his family. They were deeply religious, devoted to every ritual. So Easter meant an extra long mass, endless prayers, and a crowded sanctuary packed with voices lifted to the heavens. After the service, the children were ushered downstairs to their classrooms for Sunday school. That basement, decorated in pastel joy, felt safer than anywhere else. But safety is a fragile illusion. The hallway was long, lined with classrooms, and at the far end were the bathrooms and a heavy gray door that led outside. The adults always warned them not to touch that door. It would lock behind you and leave you stranded. It was meant only for emergencies. Nobody could imagine that evil might use that very exit as its entrance.
That's a good idea.
On that Easter morning, the boy excused himself from his classroom to use the restroom. His teacher nodded absent-mindedly, while the rest of the kids colored cheerful pictures of Jesus rising from the tomb. He slipped down the hallway, humming lights buzzing faintly overhead, the faint echoes of teachers' voices mixing with the sound of his own small footsteps. He entered the bathroom and closed himself into a stall, unaware that he had just stepped into the most terrifying moment of his childhood. At first, there was only silence. Then came the scraping sound. It was faint but unnatural, like metal dragging unevenly against metal. It did not sound like a lock being turned or a door shifting. It sounded deliberate, slow, and sharp. He froze, trying to convince himself it was another child. He finished quickly, then stepped out to wash his hands. That is when he saw the reflection in the mirror. The stall door beside us creaked open, and instead of a friend or classmate, a figure emerged. A grown man wearing an Easter Bunny costume. But this was not the bright, fluffy kind children loved. This was dingy, sagging, grayish white instead of pure. Its fur stained, as if never washed. One of the costume's plastic eyes hung crookedly, sewn back on with rough stitching. The ears flopped forward lifelessly, and the head tilted slightly in an unsettling way. The boy, still young and innocent, did not feel fear at first. He thought it was a surprise, maybe even magical. He smiled and whispered,
Did you hear that?
"Hi." The figure said nothing,
What was that
only
sound?
stared through the crooked mask. Then slowly, it raised an arm and pointed toward the exit. Finally, a muffled voice seeped through the fabric. "You're the lucky chosen child. I have a gift for you outside." The boy's heart leapt with excitement. In his mind, this was a blessing, a prize, something special delivered by the Easter Bunny himself. He forgot every warning, every rule about the gray door. He pushed it open and stepped outside, the strange figure following silently behind. The parking lot stretched wide, mostly empty. At the far corner, half hidden behind a dumpster and bushes, sat a car. The man in the costume led him toward it. At some point, he even held the boy's hand. It all seemed strange, but children's minds fill in gaps with wonder rather than suspicion. And then the moment came. Another figure stepped out of the car. Another Easter Bunny. 2 of them. Both silent, both wrong. The illusion shattered. Confusion overtook him. Why 2? Why no candy basket? Why did everything suddenly feel so heavy with dread? It was then that salvation arrived. A teacher named Miss Sabrina happened to be walking outside, preparing for the egg hunt. She glanced toward the parking lot and saw the scene. What erupted from her throat was a scream so primal that the boy still remembers it decades later. A scream filled with terror and fury. The man in the costume dropped the boy's hand instantly and bolted toward the car. The boy turned and sprinted toward Miss Sabrina, throwing himself into her arms. Behind him, tires squealed, and the car sped away. In the briefest glance, he thought he saw another child in the back seat. A flash of a face, gone too quickly to confirm. But that image still haunts him. Was it another victim? Was he seconds away from being stuffed inside that car, disappearing forever? The police were called. Statements were taken. The boy repeated his story again and again, trying to convince himself it was real, not a nightmare. The adults asked questions about the other child in the car, about the costumes, about the strange key that must have unlocked the basement door. But no arrests were made. No missing child reports were connected. The case went nowhere. His mother wept uncontrollably. His father raged in silence. The church never found out how the intruder gained access or how long he'd been waiting inside that bathroom stall. But the possibility that the man had been familiar with the church's layout, that he knew where to park, how to escape, left a permanent scar on everyone involved. For the boy, now grown, Easter is never the same. While others laugh and celebrate, he remembers the sagging costume, the crooked eye, the soft words promising a gift. He thinks about how close he came to vanishing into the back seat of that car. He wonders about the other child he might have seen. And every Easter, he realizes that evil can wear any mask, even the mask of joy. What could have been a memory of colored eggs and laughter became instead the most chilling reminder that innocence attracts predators. In a place of faith, within the walls of his church, the devil had disguised himself as a bunny and reached for him. He escaped, but not unscathed. He carries the story not as a holiday anecdote, but as a lifelong warning. Sometimes, the monsters we are told to fear are real, and sometimes, they come dressed in costumes that children are taught to love. For most teenagers, Easter weekend means family dinners, candy baskets, and maybe the occasional eye roll when parents insist on keeping old traditions alive. But for one group of friends, Easter became the backdrop to something far darker, something that none of them would ever forget. It started with a simple plan. No school on Friday, a night free from rules, and a big house in the middle of nowhere with no parents around. 6 boys gathered at Raz's home, a place they had used many times before as their hangout. His family owned the largest house among them, with acres of land and a stretch of woods that seemed perfect for adventure. The air buzzed with excitement, the kind only teenagers feel when they know they are free for a night. They laughed, played video games, and dared each other to come up with something more thrilling. Then came the idea, Manhunt, but with an Easter twist. It was their own creation, a game where seekers hunted hiders, but with eggs hidden around the property as an extra challenge. It sounded fun, harmless, like a perfect way to fill the night.
Okay.
The rules were simple. 2 teams, one hiding, the other seeking. The seekers had to find not only their friends, but also guard hidden eggs, while the hiders had to capture them. Flashlights were gathered, plastic eggs borrowed from Raz's mother, and boundaries set. The fence line, the creek, and the slope leading to the pasture. The sun dipped below the horizon as they prepared, shadows stretching long across the yard until the woods swallowed the last light. A random number generator split them into teams, and with laughter still echoing, the hiders dashed off into the trees. The seekers, including the narrator, gave them 10 minutes, then split up to search. The thrill of darkness added intensity, and the woods transformed from familiar playground to mysterious hunting ground. At first, it was exhilarating. The narrator moved quietly, hand over his flashlight to avoid giving himself away. Moonlight filtered through the branches, enough to make out shapes, but not enough to see clearly. Every sound felt amplified: the crunch of leaves, the rustle of branches. Then, movement ahead. 20 or 30 feet away, a figure crouched behind a tree, perfectly still. The narrator assumed it was one of his friends. It fit Race's style, always hiding close, always daring the seekers to overlook him. Deciding to surprise his friend, he crept forward slowly, circling until he could rush from behind. When the moment felt right, he lunged, tapping the shoulder and shouting, "Gotcha!" But what turned to face him was not Race. It was not any of his friends. Instead, Wide, unblinking eyes stared back at him. Eyes that seemed wild, frenzied, the kind you see in someone who has lost all control. The man's hair was slicked back but filthy, his clothes torn and dirty. A smell clung to him, sharp and rotten, the stench of someone unwashed for days. Before the narrator could even react, the man slammed into him, tackling him to the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of him. He tried to scream, but the man's hands were already around his throat, pressing down with crushing weight. The boy clawed at his attacker, but he was powerless, pinned beneath someone larger, stronger, and driven by something he could not understand. For a brief, horrifying moment, he truly believed he was about to die in the middle of a game meant to be fun. Then salvation came in the form of light. A flashlight beam bounced through the trees, approaching fast. Another seeker, maybe Chuck or Raz, was running toward the sound of the struggle. The man must have noticed too, because in an instant he released his grip, jumped off, and sprinted deeper into the woods. The boy lay gasping, lungs burning, throat sore, staring after the shadow vanishing into darkness. Chuck reached him seconds later, helping him up, eyes wide with panic. He said he had seen everything. The attacker had come out of nowhere, silent and vicious. Together they stumbled back toward the house, adrenaline pushing them forward. Once they regrouped, the others listened in stunned silence as the story spilled out. That was when Arthur added something that froze them all. Before the game had even started, before the countdown was finished, he had seen two people walking through the woods. Slowly, deliberately, like they were scouting. He'd assumed it was seekers breaking the rules, but now he realized the truth. None of his friends had been near that part of the woods, which meant at least 3 strangers were out there, one who had attacked, 2 more who had been waiting. The realization sent a chill through the group. They had been outnumbered in the darkness, surrounded without even knowing it. The game had not been harmless at all. They had stumbled into someone else's territory, or worse, someone's trap. The narrator insisted they needed to call the police. After all, he had been assaulted. His life had been put in danger. But Raz, the host, grew pale and refused. His parents had grounded him in specifically forbidden gatherings. If the police came, his parents would find out, and the consequences would be severe. He begged them not to involve authorities, insisting they could just move on. The others hesitated,
We have to go now.
torn between loyalty to a friend and the seriousness of what had just happened. In the end, peer pressure won. They agreed to stay silent, though unease lingered in every corner of Roz's house that night. Some tried to laugh it off, to bury the fear beneath jokes and video games, but the narrator could not. His throat still throbbed with a memory of rough hands squeezing it. His chest still ached from the weight that had pinned him down. He went to bed early, unable to shake the dread. When morning came, he slipped away before anyone else woke, choosing escape over confrontation. For a while, he tried to bury it. He told himself people move on, bad things happen, and life continues. Yet whenever he thinks back, the image of those wild eyes resurfaces. And then there is Arthur's revelation, the thought that others had been nearby, watching, waiting. Were they planning something larger? Was the attack only the beginning of what could have been a coordinated trap? The unanswered questions linger heavier than the memory itself. He wonders now whether those strangers still haunt those woods, waiting for another group of careless teenagers to stumble into their game. One truth remains certain. What started as laughter among friends ended as a chilling reminder that darkness does not wait for invitations. Sometimes it joins the game unannounced, and sometimes it nearly wins. Family gatherings are supposed to bring comfort, especially during holidays like Easter, when generations come together to share food, laughter, and tradition. For one young man, though, Easter with his extended family became a memory so unsettling that the woods behind his uncle's house will forever symbolize fear rather than peace. His Uncle John lived far from the city, in a large house surrounded by endless trees. It was the kind of setting people romanticize, quiet, isolated, beautiful in its simplicity. For him, however, it felt suffocating. He had never been a nature enthusiast, never enjoyed hiking or camping, and he often felt like an outsider when surrounded by relatives who lived for hunting, fishing, and outdoor life. His cousins were older, married, with kids or working farms, and the only one close to his age was Kevin. Kevin was different, laid back, kind, willing to keep him company. Without Kevin, these family trips would have been unbearable. On that particular Easter, Kevin convinced him to join a walk in the woods. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden light that filters through branches and makes everything look serene. They followed a natural trail Kevin knew well, weaving deeper into the trees. At first, it was uneventful. Kevin talked about the beauty of the forest, pointing out how far it stretched. how magical it could feel when you lost yourself in its silence. But then came the sound, a steady, heavy thud, like a hammer striking wood. Thunk, pause, thunk, pause. It was too rhythmic to be an animal, too deliberate to ignore. The two exchanged looks, unsure whether to turn back or investigate. Curiosity won, as it often does, and they crept forward cautiously, trying to pinpoint the source. What they found was more disturbing than either could have imagined. 3 crosses nailed upside down into adjacent trees, each at least 15 to 20 feet above the ground. The placement was too precise, too intentional, too sinister. Before they could even speak, movement caught their eyes. A man stood nearby, watching them. He looked like a lumberjack, with a thick beard and rugged clothes, but there was nothing warm in his presence. His eyes locked onto them with cold intensity. Kevin instinctively stepped in front, shielding his cousin. The man spoke in a low, steady voice. "You shouldn't be here." That was all. No explanation, no aggression, just a statement dripping with warning. Kevin muttered apologies, promising they were leaving, and they backed away slowly. The man never moved, never blinked, just watched them retreat until the trees swallowed him from sight. The walk back was silent except for the pounding of their hearts. Every crack of a twig behind them felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind through branches sounded like whispers. When they finally reached the safety of Uncle John's house, they immediately told him what they had seen. Uncle John, a friendly man who knew nearly all his neighbors, grew serious when he heard their description. He did not recognize the man. The upside-down crosses only deepened his concern. Some relatives suggested arming up and confronting whoever was out there, but Uncle John refused. Confrontation could bring danger directly to the house, and with children and family gathered inside, he would not risk it. The evening carried on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Laughter felt forced, meals were quieter, and the shadow of the woods loomed heavier against the windows. That night, the narrator went to bed early, still rattled. Yet sleep did not bring comfort. He woke before dawn, restless, and wandered to Uncle John's study on the 3rd floor. From the large window, he could see the entire backyard stretching toward the forest. At first, it was peaceful.
What is that?
The faintest light of morning brushed the horizon. Then he noticed it, a flickering glow at the edge of the trees. At first, he thought it might be a trick of the eyes, but as he focused, it became clear. 3 figures holding torches stood just beyond the tree line, motionless, facing the house. A chill gripped him, so powerful he almost screamed. Instead, he ran to Uncle John, shaking him awake and blurting out what he saw. Uncle John reacted instantly. He grabbed his rifle, pulled on clothes, and stormed to the back deck. The boy watched from the doorway as his uncle scanned the yard. By then, the torchbearers had retreated deeper into the woods, their lights faint until swallowed by the dark. Uncle John fired 3 shots into the air, the sound splitting the quiet morning. The rest of the house woke in chaos, relatives pouring into hallways, children crying, questions flying. It was Easter morning, and instead of celebration, fear was their guest. Nobody slept after that. The day carried on with an undercurrent of dread, every adult glancing nervously toward the trees, every child held closer than usual. The joy of the holiday was gone, replaced by unease that no amount of food or laughter could erase. Months have passed since that night. Uncle John insists he has not seen anything unusual since, but doubt lingers. Who were those people? Why the crosses? Why stand in silence, watching a family home from the edge of the woods? The boy, now older, cannot shake the image of those torches, the faceless figures holding them, the way they stood like sentinels in the dark. It was not random. It was not harmless. Something sinister is out there, hidden among the trees, and for him, Easter will never again be associated with light and life. Instead, it will forever be haunted by the memory of flames in the distance, 3 men in the shadows, and the chilling certainty that some celebrations are watched by eyes that do not belong. Easter is meant to symbolize rebirth, hope, and light after darkness. It is the story of resurrection, a day when families gather to celebrate with feasts, egg hunts, and prayers. But for those who live through the chilling experiences you have already heard, Easter no longer carries that warmth. Instead, it became a reminder that even in moments of joy, darkness is waiting nearby. When you piece the stories together, a terrifying pattern emerges. A church basement, a game in the woods, a family home in the countryside. Each of these places should have been safe, and yet each became the stage for something that looked evil straight in the eye. The boy in the church trusted the costume because he had been taught to trust the setting. A house of worship should have been the last place to fear a predator. The bunny costume was a disguise of innocence, masking intentions that were anything but holy. The fact that the intruder may have known the church layout, may have had a key, and may have planned everything carefully shows just how fragile safety really is. He walked out that door because he thought he had been chosen, special, blessed. Instead, he nearly walked into a car with strangers waiting to take him away forever. The truth is, haunting if not for the watchful eye of a teacher, that child would likely never have been seen again. The teenagers in the woods created a game to fill the night with laughter. Their biggest concern at first was whether someone would cheat or camp near an egg. But when the stranger appeared, wild-eyed and reeking, the game collapsed into something far more sinister. He did not just scare them. He attacked with the intent to harm, to kill. Worse, they realized he was not alone. At least 2 others had been in the woods before the game began, silently watching, waiting. The boys had walked into a trap without knowing it, and luck, or perhaps fate, was the only reason they escaped with their lives. The silence afterward, the decision not to call police, feels almost as chilling as the attack itself. Their fear of parental punishment outweighed the reality of the danger. Somewhere in those woods, men with unknown intentions still roam, and no one ever came looking for them. And then there is the family story, the one drenched in rural stillness. A holiday gathering turned into a nightmare when 2 cousins stumbled upon inverted crosses nailed high in the trees. The man who told them to leave did not shout or threaten. His calmness was worse, as though he was delivering a truth they could not understand. Later, the torchbearers proved this was not a coincidence. They were not just symbols carved in wood, but people, organized and deliberate, performing something hidden under the cover of trees. To stand silently facing a house in the early morning, to hold fire in hands like a ritual, these were not pranksters. These were believers in something dark, a cult or group that thrived on secrecy. The family, armed and wary, could only scare them away for the night, but they never knew who those people were, what they wanted, or whether they might return. All 3 stories share more than coincidence. They reveal how evil hides in plain sight. Costumes meant for joy can become masks for predators. Games meant for fun can lure you into danger. Forests meant for beauty can conceal rituals you were never meant to see. Easter, with its pastel colors and cheerful songs, becomes the perfect camouflage. People lower their guard, focusing on family, candy, tradition. Children are told stories of rabbits and gifts, never imagining that real monsters might be standing just a few feet away. Faith, innocence, and distraction all work in the predator's favor. That is the true horror, that evil waits not in the shadows of haunted houses or abandoned asylums, but in the places we least expect it. What makes these accounts so disturbing is that none of them ended with justice. The man in the bunny costume was never caught. The strangers in the woods vanished into darkness. The cult-like figures melted back into the trees, never identified. Their absence lingers heavier than their presence, because it means they are still out there. Somewhere there are people who dress as rabbits to lure children, people who hide in forests waiting for careless teenagers, people who gather beneath crosses to worship something unknown. They exist, even if we do not see them. And that is why these stories remain with those who survived. They are not finished. They are warnings. Imagine celebrating Easter now after living through one of these experiences. For the boy, every chocolate bunny looks like a threat. Every church hallway feels like a trap. For the teenager, every rustle in the woods echoes the night he nearly died beneath a stranger's hands. For the young man at his uncle's house, every flicker of light in the distance brings back the sight of torches burning through the trees. Their Easter is forever tainted. While others laugh, they remember the price of letting their guard down, the cost of innocence. They paid it in fear, in trauma, in the kind of memories that never fade. There is a reason horror thrives on holidays. We expect safety, comfort, and joy, and that is exactly when we are most vulnerable. These stories are not myths, they are true accounts. They prove that behind every celebration, shadows are watching, waiting for the right moment to step forward. And the scariest part? None of the monsters were supernatural. They were human. Humans who chose to wear costumes, to hide in woods, to carry torches and build symbols. Humans who walked among us, unnoticed, until the moment they decided to strike. Easter is a holiday of light, but for these survivors, it became the darkest day of all. And it reminds us all of a chilling truth. Sometimes the most dangerous demons are not imagined. They are the ones standing silently in front of us, disguised by the very joy we celebrate. Holidays have a strange way of lowering our defenses. We are told from the time we are children that Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Easter are times of joy, unity, and innocence. But the stories you have just heard reveal a darker reality, that even during the brightest celebrations, darkness can creep in unnoticed. These 3 Easter encounters were not fiction. They were lived, breathed, and remembered by those who were unfortunate enough to witness them. And they leave us with one undeniable truth: evil hides best in plain sight. The boy in the church basement trusted the costume because he had been taught to trust the place it appeared. A church should have been untouchable, holy, safe. Yet a predator dressed in a sagging Easter bunny suit waited in silence for the right moment to lead him away. That child was saved by sheer chance, but how many others have not been? The teenagers in the woods turned a childhood game into something thrilling, never imagining that real danger was watching from the trees. They nearly stumbled into an ambush they never could have escaped. And the young man, at his uncle's farm, witnessed something few would ever want: to see ritualistic symbols carved into the forest and faceless figures with torches standing at the edge of the night. Each story ends with survival, but survival does not erase the scars. They all walked away, but none walked away unchanged. So what do we learn? That safety is never guaranteed. That predators, cults, and strangers do not wait for darkness in abandoned places. They come where laughter is loudest, where children feel safest, where trust is highest. They use costumes, games, and rituals to blend in. And if you are not vigilant, you may never realize danger is near until it is too late. These survivors remind us that faith must be balanced with caution, that joy must be tempered with awareness, and that protecting ourselves and our loved ones means refusing to believe that evil only hides in fairy tales. If you ever feel something is wrong, trust your instincts. If a stranger approaches with promises that seem too good to be true, step back. If you hear something in the woods that does not belong, do not dismiss it. If symbols appear that you cannot explain, take them seriously. And above all, never ignore the small voice inside that whispers when danger is near. Because that voice might be the one thing standing between you and a story like the ones you just heard. This is more than horror, it is a warning. The light of Easter may be strong, but shadows still linger in its glow. Do not forget what these stories have taught. Remain cautious, remain aware, and remember, evil does not announce itself. It waits, watching, dressed in smiles, laughter, or even the costume of a rabbit. And when the moment is right, it strikes. Welcome to The Price Paid. Subscribe now, because these stories are not just entertainment. They are reminders of what is out there and the price we pay if we forget